A loud splash echoed through the courtyard of Buckingham Palace as a paper cup arced through the spring air, hitting the shoulder of a royal guard with a wet slap. Brown coffee soaked into the crisp red uniform, dripping down in thick streaks. For a moment, the world froze. The crowd gasped, cameras stopped clicking, children stopped laughing. A single man stood grinning behind his phone, capturing the chaos he'd just created, thinking it was all a harmless joke. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Just moments earlier, the courtyard was a tranquil display of British tradition. The midday sun reflected off the golden gates, and tourists stood in respectful awe behind the black iron fence. The sharp rhythm of boots on stone echoed as the guards performed their precise rotations. Among them stood Corporal James Aldridge, a 30-year-old soldier with a square jaw and unshakable posture. His 8 years in the British Army included a tour in Iraq and another in Kosovo. Now, as a member of the Royal Guard, he wore his scarlet coat with pride, his expression blank, his will like iron. He hadn't flinched once, not for shouting children, not for tourists snapping photos an inch from his face. But this was different. Across the fence, holding a phone in one hand and laughing with his friends, stood Tyler Green, a 27-year-old American travel vlogger from Miami. With over 1.2 million subscribers on YouTube, Tyler was known for his loud stunts, borderline pranks, and reckless disregard for cultural norms. This trip to London was supposed to be the British Prank Series, his big international breakout. He had already filmed himself pretending to knight tourists, offering fake tea bags to strangers, and shouting, "Long live the Queen," in a busy pub. But today he had a new idea, something epic. He held up the coffee cup to his camera and whispered, "Watch this, guys. British royalty meets Starbucks special." His friend behind the phone snorted, trying to hold in laughter. As Tyler flung the half-full cup, the crowd's mood changed instantly. Tourists gasped. An elderly woman near the gate dropped her ice cream. A child began to cry. Tyler's grin widened. He turned to his camera, still rolling. "That was crazy, right? Did you get it? Tell me you got it." He stopped mid-sentence, because Corporal Aldridge had just taken a step forward. The Royal Guard's motion was subtle, yet thunderous in its implications. One black boot landed firmly on the stone, his hand inching toward the hilt of his ceremonial rifle. A hushed silence fell across the courtyard. Tyler blinked, unsure. "Wait, did he just move?" His friend whispered, "Dude, I think he's coming this way." Aldridge took another step, then another. His eyes were locked on Tyler, unblinking. Though still in perfect form, there was a storm brewing beneath the guard's stoic exterior. His soaked shoulder twitched ever so slightly, but his face remained emotionless. Tyler's bravado wavered. "Yo, man, it was just coffee. It's not like, come on, it's just a joke, bro." The crowd began backing away from Tyler as Aldridge advanced slowly but deliberately, stopping just inches from the fence. Then he spoke, loud, clear, commanding. "You, step back from the fence immediately." His voice cut through the air like a whip, deep and authoritative, shaped by years of battlefield commands and palace protocol. Tyler stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. Wait, I didn't mean, I didn't actually think." Aldridge raised his voice again. "You have defiled the uniform of the crown. Step away." A murmur of agreement rippled through the onlookers. An elderly gentleman clapped. A mother whispered to her son, "See? That's why you don't mess with the guard." Just then, a second guard appeared at the edge of the courtyard, signaling discreetly to nearby palace security. Within seconds, 2 officers in black jackets began making their way through the crowd toward Tyler and his giggling entourage. Realizing the situation had gone far beyond YouTube views, Tyler began to panic. "I didn't mean to. Look, it was just a prank. Just a prank, I swear." The officers arrived. One grabbed Tyler's arm gently but firmly. "Sir, you need to come with us, right now." Tyler's camera was still rolling as he stuttered, "Wait, no, I can explain. I'm an influencer. Look me up, Tyler Travels." The officer responded with a raised brow. "You can explain yourself at the station." As they escorted him through the parting sea of tourists, boos and jeers followed. Corporal Aldridge turned on his heel, returned to his post, and resumed his position with robotic precision. His soaked shoulder glistened under the sun, but he showed no sign of discomfort. The guard was once again silent, still, immovable. But the message had been delivered, and no one watching would ever forget it. The video of Tyler's coffee prank spread like wildfire. Within hours, clips had flooded social media platforms: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. One short video, zoomed in on the precise moment Corporal Aldridge took his first step, had already hit 7 million views by nightfall. The title read, "When the Statue Moved and Karma Hit Hard." Tyler's followers, once loyal and eager, were now split. Some doubled down on the stunt, calling it harmless fun. But the overwhelming majority turned on him. Comments poured in, "Disrespectful clown." "Imagine treating history like a joke." "You messed with the wrong country, buddy." In his hotel room overlooking Hyde Park, Tyler scrolled through the reactions in silence, the blue light from his phone highlighting the panic in his eyes. Across the room, his friend and cameraman, Derek, finally broke the silence. "You're trending in, like, 7 countries." Tyler didn't respond. Derek added, "But, not in a good way." Still no response. "Dude?" Derek leaned forward. "What's the plan? Do we spin it? Make it part of the brand?" Tyler looked up. His voice was lower now, less cocky, more shaken. "I didn't think he'd move, man. I thought they weren't allowed to do anything." "Well, turns out they are," Derek muttered. "And they will, especially when you throw coffee at them on camera." Tyler's phone buzzed again, an email this time. He opened it with trembling fingers. Subject: Partnership termination. Urgent. One of his biggest sponsors, a travel gear brand that had paid him handsomely to wear their backpacks and plug their luggage tags, had dropped him. Effective immediately. Then came a call. Unknown number. Tyler hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Green?" a voice asked, calm but official. "Speaking." "This is Constable Riley from the Metropolitan Police. I'm calling to inform you that following today's incident outside Buckingham Palace, we'll be requiring a formal statement from you in person. We'd prefer if you came voluntarily, but—" "I'll come," Tyler blurted. I'll come. Tomorrow morning? 9 a.m., Scotland Yard." Click. Tyler sat back, tossing the phone aside. His heart pounded. The room was too quiet, too heavy. For the first time since his rise to online fame, he didn't know what to say on camera. Meanwhile, back at Buckingham Palace, the evening change of the guard was wrapping up. Corporal Aldridge stood beside the new shift, his posture as flawless as ever, but a quiet storm lingered beneath the surface. He could still feel the coffee drying into the threads of his uniform. It wasn't about the mess. It was about the meaning, the disrespect. After the ceremony, Aldridge made his way through the inner courtyard, removed his bearskin hat, and walked silently into the locker room. The weight of the day settled over him. He sat on a bench and stared at the soaked red fabric of his tunic, his gloved fingers trailing along the darkened fabric. "Still holding it together, James?" a voice echoed across the room. Sergeant Mason, Aldridge's longtime friend and fellow veteran, approached with a quiet smirk. "As always," Aldridge replied without looking up. Mason sat beside him. "That kid's lucky you kept your cool. I've seen men snap for far less." "I wasn't trained to snap," Aldridge said softly. "We don't protect the crown by reacting. We protect it by enduring." There was a pause. Then Mason spoke more seriously. "You're going to be in the news tomorrow. Already are. Full footage is out. People are calling you the The unshakable guard. Aldridge frowned. It shouldn't take a disgraceful act to remind people what this uniform means. Mason stood and patted his shoulder. Maybe, but sometimes one fool is all it takes to wake up a crowd. The next morning, Tyler arrived at Scotland Yard in silence, dressed in a hoodie and sunglasses, stripped of his usual flair. No camera, no smile, just fear. A constable met him at the desk and led him down a narrow corridor, then into a room with white walls and a single table. 2 officers sat on the opposite side. What followed was a 2-hour interview. Tyler tried to explain that it was for content, that he didn't know it would be taken so seriously. But the officers weren't interested in excuses. They spoke of cultural disrespect, public misconduct, and even potential charges under the Public Order Act. At the end, one of the officers looked him dead in the eye. "You humiliated a soldier, one who stands unflinching in service to his country, while you threw coffee at him for clicks." Tyler left the building more broken than when he entered. He didn't even notice the 2 paparazzi waiting at the exit. Later that night, in a London hotel, he sat in front of his laptop. The record button blinked at the corner of his screen. This time, there were no flashy transitions, no catchy intro music. Just Tyler, pale, quiet. "I messed up," he began. "I thought it was funny. I thought it'd go viral. And it did. But for all the wrong reasons. I disrespected someone who stands silently to protect something I barely understand. That was stupid. I'm sorry." The apology went live. Within minutes, reaction videos popped up. Some called it too late. Others found it sincere. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over yet. Back at the palace, Corporal Aldridge received a letter from his commanding officer. Inside was a commendation for professionalism under provocation. The note read, "The eyes of millions were upon you, and you upheld the dignity of the crown without a single misstep. We thank you." But for Aldridge, it wasn't about medals or attention. It was about doing his job, about standing firm while the world moved chaotically around him. Still, a part of him couldn't forget the look in that young man's eyes, the moment he realized that mocking honor had consequences. And just days later, another unexpected turn unfolded. The Royal Household Communications Office contacted Aldridge. A documentary team working on guarding the crown's stories behind the uniform had requested to include him as a featured segment, not because of the prank, but because of how he handled it. "They want to film you next week," Sergeant Mason said, handing him the folder. "Might be time people saw who's behind the bearskin." Aldridge hesitated. "I didn't do anything special." "You did what few can," Mason replied. "You stood still when every instinct told you to act." The days passed, and Tyler flew home to Miami. His channel saw a dip in views, and his next few uploads were noticeably more somber. "London changed me," he said in one video. And yeah, it should have. Meanwhile, in London, the sun rose once more over the golden gates of Buckingham Palace. A new group of tourists gathered, eyes wide, cameras ready. But no one dared cross the line. No one shouted. No one even joked. And in the middle of the courtyard, in red and black, stood Corporal James Aldridge. Still, watchful, unshaken. The marble floors of the palace's inner wing echoed as camera crews wheeled in their equipment. It was a rare moment behind the scenes. Normally, the Royal Guard operated far from the public eye except when standing on ceremony. But today, permission had been granted. A young assistant with a clipboard approached Corporal James Aldridge. "They're ready for you, sir. Just whenever you're comfortable." Aldridge gave a brief nod and adjusted his cuffs, freshly pressed into the red wool of a new uniform. The old one, stained by coffee, had been retired and placed into the regimental archive. A silent relic of the day tradition had been mocked, and then fiercely defended. The lights flickered on. The director raised a hand. "And Rolling! The camera zoomed in as Aldridge stood in front of the Queen's Guard training hall, arms folded behind his back. When people see the bearskin, the red coat, the rifle, they think we're statues, but every one of us carries stories they'll never read in a book, he began. His voice was calm but resolute, trained not just by service, but by silence, years of learning when not to speak and how to make words matter when they finally came. Some think we're decoration, props, but this uniform isn't for show. It's a promise that we protect what has been built, that we remember those who came before us, and that we stand still not because we can't move, but because we choose not to. The director whispered to her assistant, "He's perfect, absolutely perfect." Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Tyler Green's world had been turned upside down. His face, once known for outrageous thumbnails and travel antics, had become the internet's favorite cautionary tale. Headlines ranged from "Vlogger crosses the line at Buckingham" to "Royal Guard humiliates influencer on camera." Despite his apology, the internet wasn't quick to forget. Brand deals had dried up. One sponsor emailed, "Your values no longer align with our family image." Another simply wrote, "We appreciate your honesty, but we have to move on." But oddly, Tyler wasn't fighting it. He didn't run back to his usual content. No, "let's move past this" videos. No attempts to spin it. Instead, he spent his time researching the British Royal Guard, watching hours of footage, reading articles, even messaging historians for interviews. Something had shifted inside him. One evening, he sat in front of the camera again. No music, no edits, just a plain gray wall behind him. "I didn't just disrespect a soldier," he said. "I disrespected tradition, history. I disrespected someone who stood still while I threw a drink at him and never flinched." He looked straight into the lens. That kind of discipline deserves more than an apology. It deserves understanding. Across the screen, a single sentence appeared in white letters. "I'm flying back to London." Back in the UK, Aldridge had returned to routine. His documentary clip had gone viral, especially the line, "We stand still, not because we can't move, but because we choose not to." It had been turned into a meme, a motivational quote, and even a slogan on t-shirts. But James paid it little attention. Viral fame had never been his goal. He spent his mornings training new recruits, guiding them through rifle drills, composure routines, and stress tests designed to make them flinch. He spent his afternoons in silence, on duty, and he spent his nights walking along the Thames, where the city hummed with life but left him alone. Until one afternoon, something unexpected happened. He was called into the commander's office. "Corporal Aldridge," the commander began, "you're going to want to sit down." James arched a brow, but remained standing. The commander cleared his throat. "The young man who threw the coffee is back in London. He's requested a meeting with you." Aldridge didn't blink. "Request denied, I hope." The commander smiled faintly. "It's your decision. Off-duty, informal. He's not asking to justify himself. Says he wants to understand." Aldridge was silent for a long moment. "Let him meet me at Horse Guards Parade. At dawn. If he's serious, he'll show." The next morning, London was draped in mist. The gray sky hung low over Whitehall, and the usual tourist bustle hadn't begun yet. It was just past 5:30 a.m. Tyler stood alone in the center of the parade ground, hands deep in his coat pockets, shivering. He wasn't streaming. No camera, no clicks. Then from the far archway came the sound of boots. Aldridge appeared, dressed not in ceremonial red, but in a standard army overcoat, bearing the insignia of his regiment. He walked steadily toward the young man and stopped several feet away. Tyler cleared his throat. "I know I don't deserve your time." Aldridge studied him carefully. "You're right. You don't." Tyler looked down. "But you're here, and not filming," Aldridge added. Tyler looked up again. Because I wanted to listen. I read everything I could. I watched interviews, your training, your deployments. I had no idea. James tilted his head slightly. Why does it matter now? Because when I watched that footage again, I saw someone who didn't just represent a nation. I saw someone who kept their dignity while I lost mine, and I've never felt smaller. The silence between them was long, but not cold. James finally nodded toward a nearby bench. Walk with me. They sat. For nearly an hour, Aldridge explained what the uniform meant. Not just the pageantry, but the pressure, the discipline, the history, stitched into every thread. And Tyler just listened. No questions, no defense, just quiet acceptance. When they stood, Aldridge offered his hand. Don't forget what you learned here. Tyler shook it firmly. I won't. The following week, a short video appeared on Tyler's channel. Not a vlog, but a 7-minute tribute titled, What I Learned from the Man I Tried to Humiliate. It featured no footage of the prank, no monetization, just a story of redemption. Back at the barracks, Sergeant Mason found James reading a letter. Fan mail, he teased. James smiled faintly. Not quite, just respect. Finally going where it belongs. Mason chuckled. You do know you've become a symbol now, right? Symbols don't move, James replied. But men do, one step at a time. And just outside the palace gates, tourists stood once more, quiet, respectful, watching the royal guards perform their duty. And none of them dared cross the line. The changing of the guard was underway again. Tourists lined the iron railings in respectful silence, their phones raised, their voices hushed. Something had shifted since the infamous prank. An unspoken reverence now lingered in the air around Buckingham Palace. This time, no one tried to provoke. No one stepped out of line. Among the crowd stood an elderly couple holding hands, a group of students from Belgium, and a quiet young man in a gray hoodie with his phone in his pocket, not in his hand. Tyler Green didn't come to film. He came to watch and to remember. On the parade ground, under the weight of his bearskin hat, stood Corporal James Aldridge, still, towering, impeccable. But beneath the ceremonial silence, much had changed. The footage of Aldridge's calm confrontation had been featured on news channels across the globe. Major networks aired pieces on the discipline behind the uniform. Talk shows dissected the meaning of honor. A respected historian even appeared on the BBC and said, this wasn't just a viral moment, it was a cultural reminder. The documentary segment James had filmed, it aired 2 weeks ago and became one of the most viewed military features the UK had ever broadcast. Viewers were drawn not just to the striking visuals of polished boots and synchronized drills, but to the story, the human behind the uniform. Aldridge had received hundreds of letters from viewers around the world. Children wrote to say they now wanted to become royal guards. Veterans from other nations commended his restraint. Even a soldier in the U.S. Marines had written saying, "What you did, we felt that here." Despite the media frenzy, James kept his routine. Each day began at dawn. Each step during the guard change remained timed to perfection. His silence had become louder than any headline. But on one rare afternoon off-duty, something unusual occurred. As Aldridge walked through Hyde Park, alone out of uniform, he spotted a familiar figure seated on a bench beneath a chestnut tree. Tyler. Noticing him, Tyler stood up awkwardly. "Hey, I wasn't sure if I'd see you again." James gave a short nod. "You come here often?" "Sometimes," Tyler replied. "It reminds me I'm not the center of anything." James looked out over the grass. Perspective's a powerful thing. Tyler hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket. I wanted to give you something." He held out a small velvet box. Aldridge raised an eyebrow but opened it cautiously. Inside was a polished silver pin, engraved simply, "Stand still, mean more." Tyler spoke quietly. I know it's just a gesture. But that day changed me. I didn't realize how loud I'd become until I heard your silence. James closed the box slowly. You don't need to prove anything to me? I'm not, Tyler said. I'm reminding myself. That evening, Tyler boarded a flight back to Miami. But this time, he didn't post an airport selfie. He didn't update his story. He just stared out the window, thinking. Months passed. Eventually, the story faded from headlines. The internet moved on, as it always does. But something lingered, an echo of the moment one man stood still and another learned to. Back at Buckingham Palace, Aldridge prepared for a ceremony honoring long-standing members of the household division. Among the guests were generals, ministers, and quietly, in the back row, Tyler Green. No cameras, no fanfare, just silent respect. As the ceremony concluded, the Lord Chamberlain stepped forward. For service not only in duty, but in dignity, for reminding the world that strength is not loud, it is calm. We present Corporal James Aldridge with the Silver Order of Honor. Applause filled the courtyard. Aldridge stepped forward, receiving the medal with a sharp salute. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. But as his eyes scanned the crowd and briefly landed on Tyler, he gave the faintest nod. Outside, the tourists had begun to disperse. One small boy tugged on his mother's coat. "Why don't the guards move?" His mother smiled gently. "Because they're guarding something precious." The boy looked again at the red-coated men behind the gates. Even when people are mean to them, especially then. And in that quiet, a lesson lived on, not just in muscle or metal or ceremony, but in stillness, in patience, in choosing not to react, even when the world pushes you to. Because dignity doesn't shout, it stands still. Respect isn't about loud gestures, it's about quiet strength. What would you have done in Tyler's place? Would you have gone back to apologize or kept running? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another lesson from the Royal Guard.